Right guys, today I wanted to make a video about the question of talent production in football and basically what set of teams do the big clubs in Europe, the sort of clubs who are going to be trying to create a European Super League, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, the Milan clubs, Juventus and the top six in England, what sort of teams do they look at signing players from? And who are the most reliable for producing players that go on to succeed at the club they then join. So I think in every big league in Europe, it has two or three, maybe four teams that often have squads that get picked apart by the big clubs when they put a good team together that either do successful in a competition like we've seen with teams in the Champions League or Europa League. I think good examples of that are Ajax in 2018-19, Monaco in 2016-17. I think they're probably the two most useful examples in this instance. But also you've got teams that are just have players that have ridiculous statistics. I think the best example of this from last season was Darwin Núñez in the Portuguese league, who scored 34 goals last season in just 41 games. So that's obviously an incredible goal scoring record. So for example, in each league, France, you've got teams like Lille and Monaco are probably the best example, I would say. I think a lot of the big Premier League signings are over the last few years especially have come from Lille. When you look at players like Nicolas Pepe, Eden Hazard, Gervinho, Arsenal signed many years ago, Boubakary Soumaré, Sven Botman, the list goes on. So that's probably the best example for France. Germany, you've got teams like Borussia Dortmund, Bayer Leverkusen, who else? Leipzig. Although then again, most of their players just go to one club, and that's Bayern Munich. Really, Bayern Munich definitely seem to get first dibs when it comes to that. But yeah, so every league has them. Even England, I would say England. You've got Brighton, probably the best example of this right now, with players like Marc Cucurella, who else? Leandro Trossard, Yves Bissouma, all leaving, and at the moment there's the ongoing saga of Moises Caicedo as well. So literally every league in Europe has it. And my question for this video is Portugal the best country for this? Because I think in Portugal you've got the three big clubs, or the three successful clubs anyway. I think you could definitely say that Braga have a right to say that they are a big club, but they haven't managed to sustain the same amount of recent success as Sporting Club de Portugal, Porto and Benfica. So, I mean, let's just list off a few names to start with. So Benfica, they're probably the best example of all the teams out of all three teams. You've got players like Darwin Núñez, Ruben Dias, João Cancelo, another example, Bernardo Silva. So, lots of examples. Did I say João Felix? I think I did. And then Porto, another example, Luis Diaz, Fabio Vieira, Eder Militao, all come from Porto in the past 4 or 5 years. And Sporting Club de Portugal, probably the best example for them is Bruno Fernandes. You've also got the likes of Pedro Porro, William Carvalho, and numerous other players. So what I wanted to get across is are they the most reliable for getting a good product for what you buy, basically, out of a player? And I think they probably are, because obviously there's been many great signings and talent's been unearthed from other countries, Spain, Germany, France, Italy, Although Italy, I'd say, is probably the weakest out of the top 5 leagues for this. I don't think it's the weakest league in the top 5 leagues, but I think for producing talent, it possibly is. I don't think that's too unfair to say. Holland is also very good. Belgium's got better over recent years as well. So there are good examples from every league. But for me, I just think Portugal is so consistent, and I think that's why you see teams constantly linked with players from Portuguese football as well, because they're not just good at improving homegrown players from Portugal. They can often sign players from maybe countries that are sort of they're Portuguese speaking countries or Spanish speaking countries from South America. Obviously, the two best examples from that right now are Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz, both signed by Liverpool. Another player for Porto who I've completely forgotten whilst we're on the subject of Liverpool is Diogo Jota. So the list of examples is endless, to be honest. The amount of successful players who have even made their debut in Portuguese football or have been sold on to clubs. It really is endless, and for me, I think they probably are the best for talent production in Europe, because I think another good point to make as well is that with Benfica and Porto in particular, I think you can also make a case for Sporting, but Benfica and Porto in particular, over the past 4 or 5 years, we've consistently seen them sell their best players to big clubs, but also managed to sustain their success in the Champions League, reaching the round of 16 or quarterfinals consistently. I know that's usually where they get cut off, the quarterfinals. It's very rare they make it to the semi-finals, but in itself that's an achievement given how little their expenditure is on players, and how much they do rely on scouting and academy products. So yeah, I think that is probably the biggest reason why you could say that, because even though you see, like I mentioned earlier on in the video, that you get teams like Monaco and Ajax who occasionally make great teams and they get picked apart, you don't see them do it as consistently as you do with, for example, Lille. They've had some great players in the past few years, like Victor Osimhen, probably the best example of that, and I did name a few earlier on in the video as well on top of that. And they get picked apart, but Lille had a very good season in 2021, winning Ligue 1, but they're yet to show any signs of repeating that, so they haven't been able to rebuild their squad instantly like Benfica and Porto have. So for me, that's another reason why. And also Sporting, you look at what they've managed to do with, in particular, I would say, when Bruno Fernandes left Sporting in 2020 to join Man United, you've seen how they've managed to then produce a replacement in Matheus Nunes, who they sold to Wolves, and this season they've got a ready replacement in Pedro Gonçalves. So it's like a constant conveyor belt of just talent, and they always have someone waiting and ready to step in and have a brilliant season and then sell on that valuable player for big money. Because that's another thing, clubs now have sort of stopped letting the big clubs take advantage of them. They've sort of said, right, this player's talented, we'll have the money, please. So yeah, I think that's why the Portuguese league is the best for producing talent in Europe. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.